August 21st, 1942. 2 o'clock hours. The eastern bank of the Ilu River, Guadalcanal. The jungle breathes in the darkness. Private First Class Robert Leckie presses his cheek against the wooden stock of his M1 Garand, feeling the weapon's weight settle into his shoulder pocket. Sweat runs down his temples despite the pre-dawn chill. Somewhere across the sandbar, beyond the coconut grove silhouetted against the starlit Pacific, 1,500 Japanese soldiers are moving through the darkness. Leckie can hear them, the rustle of equipment, the splash of boots in shallow water, voices calling out in a language he doesn't understand. "Steady," whispers Sergeant John Basilone, crouched 3 yards to Leckie's right. The machine gun sergeant's hands rest on the twin grips of his water-cooled .30 caliber Browning, the barrel already aimed at the killing zone. Let them get close. The American defensive line along the Ilu River, which the Marines mistakenly call the Tenaru, stretches for just over a mile through the palm trees and kunai grass. 1,200 men from the 1st Marine Division, dug into fighting positions, sandbags stacked, fields of fire cleared. They've been on Guadalcanal for 2 weeks, holding Henderson Field against increasingly desperate Japanese counterattacks. Tonight, Colonel Ichiki has decided to retake the airfield with a single infantry regiment. His battle plan is simple: a frontal night assault across the sandbar, break through the thin American line, and sweep westward to the airfield before dawn. Ichiki's intelligence officers have assured him the Americans are poorly trained, poorly equipped, and demoralized. The reports from Japanese commanders throughout the Pacific have been consistent: American soldiers fold under aggressive night attacks. Fix bayonets, charge hard, and the Yankees break. Private First Class Leckie doesn't know any of this as he waits in his foxhole. What he does know is the weight of the rifle in his hands, 9.5 pounds of gas-operated, semi-automatic precision. The M1 Garand. General George Patton will later call it the greatest battle implement ever devised. Right now, in the pre-dawn darkness of Guadalcanal, it's just the weapon Leckie has trained with for the past 6 months. 8 rounds in an en-bloc clip. Semi-automatic fire. No need to work a bolt action between shots. The first Japanese soldiers emerge from the tree line at 2:10 hours. They come in a mass, not a careful advance, not a tactical approach, but a full-throated assault. Hundreds of men, bayonets fixed to their Type 38 Arisaka rifles, screaming banzai as they surge across the sandbar. In the moonlight, Leckie can see their silhouettes, the glint of steel, the rising and falling of arms as they wave swords and battle flags. "Open fire!" Basilone's voice cuts through the night. Leckie squeezes the trigger. The M1 Garand bucks against his shoulder, a sharp, controlled recoil. The muzzle flash illuminates the sandbar for a split second. Leckie doesn't work a bolt. He doesn't need to. His finger moves from trigger guard to trigger again. Squeeze. The rifle fires. A Japanese soldier 20 yards away crumples. Squeeze. Another shot. The Garand's gas-operated action cycles automatically, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round from the internal magazine. Squeeze. 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 8 shots in less than 10 seconds. The metallic ping of the empty en-bloc clip ejecting is sharp even over the roar of gunfire. Leckie's hands move automatically, the motion drilled into muscle memory during countless hours of training. He pulls a fresh clip from his ammunition belt, seats it into the internal magazine with his thumb, feels the bolt slam forward. 8 more rounds. Ready to fire. 15 seconds to empty the first clip and reload. Leckie's already firing again. Up and down the Marine line, the same scene repeats itself 200 times over. 200 Marines with M1 Garands, all firing semi-automatic. No bolt to work. No pause between shots except to aim and squeeze. The volume of fire is unlike anything the Japanese have encountered before. In the first 60 seconds of contact, American riflemen pour over 1,500 rounds into the charging Japanese formation. Lieutenant Koichi Watanabe leads his platoon across the sandbar in the second wave of the assault. He's 23 years old, a graduate of the Imperial Japanese Army Academy, trained in the doctrine of aggressive shock tactics. His platoon, 50 men strong, has trained together for 2 years. They fought in China, where aggressive bayonet charges broke Chinese defensive lines time and again. The Americans, Watanabe has been told, are soft, undisciplined. They'll panic under a determined night assault. Watanabe watches the first wave hit the American line and dissolve. It's not like China. Not like anything he's seen before. The sound is wrong. In previous battles, enemy fire came in stutters, individual crack of bolt-action rifles, with gaps between volleys as soldiers worked their actions. This is different. This is a continuous roar, like a wall of sound rolling across the sandbar. Muzzle flashes blink along the American line like fireflies, but they don't pause. They don't stop. The Americans are firing as fast as they can pull their triggers. Men in the first wave are falling, not in ones or twos, but in clusters. Private Hiroshi Tanaka, Watanabe's best scout, takes a round through the chest and goes down without a sound. Corporal Yamamoto makes it 3 steps further before 2 bullets, fired from the same rifle, Watanabe realizes with dawning horror, catch him in the abdomen and throat. The corporal spins and falls face first into the sand. Forward! Watanabe screams, because there's nothing else to do. The doctrine is clear: aggressive assault, close with the enemy, use the bayonet. His platoon charges. Watanabe works the bolt on his Type 38 Arisaka as he runs. The rifle is reliable, accurate, and utterly inadequate for what he's facing. It's a bolt-action weapon, a design descended from the Mauser 98. To fire, Watanabe must aim, squeeze the trigger, work the bolt upward to unlock it, pull the bolt back to extract the spent cartridge, push the bolt forward to chamber a new round from the 5-round magazine, and push the bolt down to lock it. The entire cycle takes 3 to 4 seconds for a trained soldier. Watanabe can fire perhaps 15 aimed shots per minute if he's not running, not taking cover, not trying to survive. He fires once at the American line, a wild shot in the general direction of the muzzle flashes. The rifle's recoil jars his shoulder. He works the bolt as he runs, feeling the mechanism cycle up, back, forward, down. The spent cartridge arcs through the air. By the time he's ready to fire again, he's covered 10 yards and the tactical situation has completely changed. The American machine guns open up. Basilone's .30 caliber Browning comes alive with a deep, hammering rhythm. Tracer rounds streak across the sandbar in red lines, intersecting with the charging Japanese soldiers at chest height. The machine gun fires 450 rounds per minute, 7.5 rounds every second, and Basilone sweeps the barrel back and forth across the killing zone with methodical precision. Other machine guns join in. The interlocking fields of fire turn the sandbar into a meat grinder. But it's not just the machine guns that shock Watanabe. It's the rifles. The incessant, unending crack of American rifles that never seem to pause, never seem to reload. Every Marine on the line is firing at the cyclic rate of aimed semi-automatic fire. Watanabe's military training tries to make sense of what he's seeing: 12-man American rifle squads, each man armed with an M1 Garand, each man capable of firing 40 to 60 aimed shots per minute. Do the math: 12 men times 40 shots equals 480 rounds per minute from a single squad. Watanabe's 50-man platoon, armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, can deliver perhaps 120 aimed shots per minute if everyone is in position, firing without movement, and not under effective suppression. One American squad has 4 times the firepower of Watanabe's entire platoon. The M1 Garand has transformed him from a single rifleman into a semi-automatic platform capable of sustained suppressive fire. In the 15 minutes since the battle began, Leckie has fired over 120 rounds, more ammunition than an entire Japanese rifle squad could fire in the same time period. And he's just one Marine. The Japanese assault breaks at 0235 hours. Not all at once, there's no bugle call for retreat, no organized withdrawal. It simply falls apart. Men stop charging and start retreating, then running, then fleeing back across the sandbar toward the jungle. Some crawl. Some drag wounded comrades. Many don't make it. The American fire follows them all the way to the tree line. Silence settles over the Ilu River, broken only by the moans of wounded men scattered across the sandbar. Leckie slumps in his foxhole, the M1 Garand resting across his lap. His hands shake as he counts his remaining ammunition clips. For left, 32 rounds. He's fired nearly 150 rounds in combat, more shooting than he did in his entire training cycle at Camp Lechan. Jesus Christ, someone mutters from a nearby foxhole. Did we just do that? Sergeant Basilone checks his machine gun, running his hands over the barrel to assess heat build-up. The weapon performed flawlessly, no jams, no stoppages. In 15 minutes of sustained fire, his gun crew went through nearly 1,500 rounds of linked ammunition. Combined with the rifle fire from his squad, Basilone's 12-man unit delivered over 2,000 rounds into the Japanese assault. One squad. 2,000 rounds. 15 minutes. Across the river, in the darkness of the jungle, Lieutenant Watanabe binds his leg wound with a strip torn from his uniform. Around him, the survivors of his platoon huddle in shocked silence. Of the 50 men who charged across the sandbar, fewer than 20 made it back. The rest are dead or dying on the sand, cut down by a volume of fire that seemed physically impossible. Watanabe's Type 38 Arisaka lies somewhere on the sandbar. He doesn't have the strength or will to retrieve it. The rifle, so reliable, so accurate on the firing range, proved worthless against an enemy that could fire 5 times faster. His men were brave. They followed orders. They charged with courage and determination. And they were massacred by American firepower doctrine. As dawn breaks over Guadalcanal, the full extent of the carnage becomes visible. 800 Japanese bodies lie scattered across the sandbar and coconut grove. Colonel Ichiki's regiment has been annihilated. The colonel himself will commit ritual suicide later that morning, burning his regimental colors before shooting himself. The American casualties, 35 killed, 75 wounded. It's not a battle. It's a demonstration of what happens when bolt-action infantry meets semi-automatic firepower. And this is only the first engagement. Across the Pacific, from New Guinea to the Philippines, from Tarawa to Okinawa, this same scene will repeat itself dozens of times. Japanese soldiers, trained in aggressive shock tactics and armed with reliable but outdated bolt-action rifles, will charge American positions held by Marines and Army troops equipped with M1 Garands. The firepower disparity will shape every infantry engagement for the next 3 years. August 23, 1942. Imperial Japanese Army Headquarters, Rabaul, New Britain. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji stares at the after-action report from Guadalcanal, his face expressionless. The document sits on his desk like an accusation, 5 pages of hastily written field observations from one of the few surviving officers of the Ichiki regiment. Tsuji has read it 3 times now, and each reading makes less sense than the last. Continuous automatic fire from all American positions, the report states. Individual riflemen firing at rates comparable to light machine guns. Estimated American rifle fire volume, 4 to 5 times expected rates for bolt-action infantry. Tsuji sets the report down and lights a cigarette. He's one of the Imperial Japanese Army's most influential operations officers, a man who helped plan the invasion of Malaya and the conquest of Singapore. He understands infantry tactics, combined arms coordination, and the psychological impact of aggressive night assaults. What he's reading shouldn't be possible. American infantry doctrine, as understood by Japanese intelligence, follows the same basic principles as everyone else's: riflemen armed with bolt-action weapons, supported by machine gun teams and mortars. The Americans use the Springfield 1903 rifle. Tsuji has seen captured examples in the Philippines. It's a bolt-action weapon, functionally similar to the Arisaka. 5 rounds, manual cycling between shots. Standard. Except the Americans on Guadalcanal aren't using Springfields. Get me Captain Hayashi, Tsuji tells his aide. Intelligence section. Captain Hayashi arrives 20 minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio stuffed with documents. He's a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, fluent in English, responsible for analyzing captured American equipment and documents. He salutes crisply and waits. The Ichiki disaster, Tsuji says without preamble. The survivors report impossible rates of rifle fire from American positions. Explain this. Hayashi opens his portfolio and extracts a technical manual, printed in English, water-stained, recovered from a crashed American transport aircraft 2 months earlier. The cover reads, TM9-1005-222-12, Operator's Manual for Rifle, Caliber .30, M1. The Americans have fielded a new rifle, Hayashi explains. We recovered our first complete example in the Philippines in April. The M1 Garand. It's a gas-operated, semi-automatic weapon. 8-round internal magazine. No manual bolt action required. Tsuji takes the manual, flipping through pages of technical diagrams and maintenance procedures. His English is good enough to understand the basics. Gas-operated rotating bolt. Self-loading action. Semi-automatic fire. How many have they produced? Tsuji asks. Our intelligence estimate suggests several 100,000, possibly over 1 million units. It appears to be their standard infantry rifle, Colonel. Not a specialized weapon, a standard issue. The cigarette burns forgotten between Tsuji's fingers. Every American rifleman with a semi-automatic weapon. Every 12-man squad capable of firepower previously only achievable by machine gun teams. The implications cascade through his mind like dominoes falling. Why weren't we informed? Tsuji's voice is quiet, dangerous. Why did the Ichiki regiment go into battle without this intelligence? Hayashi shifts uncomfortably. The reports were filed, Colonel. But the weapon was considered unlikely to perform reliably in jungle conditions. Semi-automatic rifles are complex. They jam. They require careful maintenance. Our analysts assumed the Americans would revert to bolt-action Springfields in the field. The Ichiki regiment lost 800 men testing that assumption. Hayashi has no response to that. Tsuji dismisses him and spends the next hour reading through intelligence files on American small arms development. The picture that emerges is troubling. The M1 Garand entered service in 1936, 6 years ago. It's been the standard American infantry rifle since before the war began. The weapon uses a robust gas-operated system designed by a Canadian-American engineer named John Garand, refined over a decade of testing at Springfield Armory. The United States is producing them at a rate of 600,000 per year across multiple factories. Japan's Type 38 Arisaka, the bolt-action rifle that armed the men who died at the Ilu River, entered service in 1905. It's a good rifle, accurate, reliable, well-suited to Japanese infantry doctrine. It's also fundamentally a 19th-century weapon, descended from the Mauser 98 design. Every shot requires manual cycling. Fire rate, 15 aimed rounds per minute for a trained soldier. The M1 Garand, 40 to 60 aimed rounds per minute. Tsuji does the arithmetic on a notepad. A Japanese infantry platoon, 50 men armed with Arisaka rifles and 2 light machine guns, can deliver approximately 750 rounds per minute of combined fire under ideal conditions. An American rifle platoon, 43 men, most with M1 Garands, plus automatic rifles and machine guns, can deliver over 2,000 rounds per minute. Nearly 3 times the firepower. Same number of soldiers. The colonel stubs out his cigarette and reaches for the telephone. This information needs to reach Tokyo. The entire Pacific strategy is based on assumptions about American combat effectiveness that are now demonstrably wrong. September 12, 1942. Edson's Ridge, Guadalcanal. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone checks his fighting position as dusk settles over the jungle. His .30 caliber machine gun is positioned on a slight rise overlooking a grassy ridge, fields of fire cleared, ammunition boxes stacked within easy reach. To his left and right, Marines from the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines dig into the coral and mud, preparing for another night. Intelligence reports indicate a major Japanese attack coming tonight. Maybe 3,000 troops, possibly more. General Vandergrift has pulled back the defensive perimeter around Henderson Field, concentrating his forces. Basilone's position is part of a thin line that must hold. Private Nash Phillips crouches in a foxhole 10 yards from Basilone's machine gun, his M1 Garand resting across his knees. He's 19 years old, from Georgia, been on Guadalcanal for 3 weeks. The Garand is so familiar now he can field strip and reassemble it blindfolded, a skill the sergeants drilled into him during the endless training on New Caledonia. Think they'll come again? Phillips asks. Count on it, Basil 1 replies, adjusting the traverse and elevation on his gun. And they'll come hard. At 9 p.m. hours, Japanese artillery opens up. Shells scream overhead and detonate along the ridge, sending up geysers of dirt and shrapnel. The bombardment lasts 30 minutes, longer and heavier than anything the Marines have experienced on Guadalcanal. When it stops, the jungle falls silent except for the ringing in everyone's ears. Then the attack begins. They come from 3 directions simultaneously, a coordinated assault by Major General Kyote Kawaguchi's brigade, over 3,000 men, probing for weak points in the American line. This isn't the disorganized charge of the Ichiki regiment. This is a combined arms attack, infantry advancing in organized waves, supported by light tanks and heavy machine guns, using fire and maneuver tactics. But they're still armed with Arisaka rifles. Phillips sees movement in the kunai grass 50 yards downslope. Silhouettes rising from the ground, advancing at a crouch. He raises his M1 Garand, settles the front sight on center mass, and squeezes the trigger. The rifle bucks. A Japanese soldier falls. Phillips doesn't work a bolt, there is no bolt to work. He shifts his aim to the next target and fires again. And again. 8 shots in 12 seconds, then the distinctive ping of the en-bloc clip ejecting. His hands move automatically, fresh clip from his bandolier, thumb the clip into the magazine, bolt slams forward. Ready to fire. Total reload time, 3 seconds. Muscle memory. Hours of drill. The M1 Garand's greatest advantage isn't just semi-automatic fire, it's the weapon's simplicity. Gas system does all the work. Soldier focuses on aiming and trigger control. No manual action to interrupt the sight picture. No fumbling with bolts under stress. The Japanese advance up the ridge in the face of withering fire. They're brave, impossibly brave. Squad leaders wave swords, urging men forward. Soldiers with Arisaka rifles fire from the hip as they charge, working their bolts, chambering fresh rounds, firing again. The discipline is impressive. The courage is undeniable. It doesn't matter. Basilone's machine gun opens up with its characteristic hammering roar. Tracer rounds arc down the slope. The Japanese formation wavers, takes casualties, reforms, keeps coming. An American rifle squad to Basilone's left pours semi-automatic fire into the assault, 12 Marines with M1 Garands, firing as fast as they can acquire targets. The volume of fire is staggering. Sergeant Mitchell Page, commanding a machine gun position 30 yards to the right, watches his entire crew get hit by Japanese artillery. He's alone with his .30 caliber Browning, surrounded by advancing Japanese infantry. Page stays on his gun, firing controlled bursts, burning through belt after belt of ammunition. When Japanese soldiers get within grenade range, he drops grenades over the lip of his position between machine gun bursts. But it's the rifle fire that saves him. Marines from adjacent positions, armed with M1 Garands, lay down suppressive fire that keeps the Japanese from overwhelming Page's position. Semi-automatic fire allows individual riflemen to deliver the sustained firepower normally requiring multiple bolt-action soldiers. 5 Marines with Garands can equal the fire output of 20 soldiers with Arisakas. The math matters in combat. Corporal Tokishi Nakamura leads his squad up Edson's Ridge, his Arisaka rifle growing hot from repeated firing. He's a veteran of the China campaigns, experienced in night assault tactics. He understands the doctrine, close with the enemy quickly, use the bayonet, exploit American panic. Japanese infantry training emphasizes aggression and shock action. The manuals say American soldiers break under pressure. The Americans aren't breaking. Nakamura fires his Arisaka, up with the bolt, back, eject the spent cartridge, forward, chamber a new round, down to lock, aim, fire. For seconds per shot if he's not moving. He manages to get off 3 rounds before muzzle flashes from the American line force him to take cover behind a fallen tree. Around him, his squad is falling apart. Private Ito takes a round through the shoulder. Corporal Soto goes down without a sound. Lance Corporal Fujimoto makes it 5 more yards before American rifle fire cuts him down. The continuous crack of American rifles never stops. It's like facing a wall of machine gun fire, except it's coming from individual soldiers spread across a 100-yard front. Nakamura can see the muzzle flashes, each position firing continuously, no gaps, no pauses except brief moments for reloading. He tries to return fire. Aims at a muzzle flash. Pulls the trigger. The Arisaka kicks against his shoulder. He works the bolt, chambering another round. By the time he's ready to fire again, the American position has fired for more shots. 4-1. That's the exchange ratio. For every shot Nakamura fires, the American fires 4. It's not about courage. It's not about training. It's about mechanical advantage. The American has a semi-automatic rifle that cycles itself. Nakamura has a bolt-action rifle that requires manual operation between every shot. In a firefight, those seconds matter. Those seconds are the difference between suppressing an enemy and being suppressed. Between winning a firefight and dying in one. Nakamura makes it another 10 yards before a bullet catches him in the chest. He falls backward, the Arisaka slipping from his fingers. His last conscious thought is confusion. How can individual American riflemen fire so fast? The battle for Edson's Ridge rages through the night. Japanese forces attack repeatedly, using different approaches, trying to find a weak point in the American line. Every assault meets the same result, devastating firepower that shreds formations before they can close to bayonet range. At 0400 hours, General Kawaguchi orders a withdrawal. His brigade has taken over 40% casualties. The attack has failed. American casualties are severe, 135 killed, 200 wounded, but the line held. Henderson Field remains in American hands. And once again, the firepower disparity proved decisive. Japanese soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles couldn't generate enough suppressive fire to support their advances. American Marines with M1 Garands could. September 14, 1942. Transport ship Nishin Maru, heading to Rabaul. Lieutenant Watanabe sits on the ship's deck, his wounded leg stretched out before him, watching the sun set over the Solomon Islands. He's being evacuated, one of the wounded survivors pulled out by Japanese destroyers during the night. Around him, other wounded men huddle in blankets, hollow-eyed, haunted by what they experienced on Guadalcanal. A young private, couldn't be more than 18, sits nearby, staring at his hands. They never stopped shooting, he mutters. We charged and they never stopped shooting. How do they do that? Watanabe knows the answer now. His scene captured American rifles, examined the mechanism. The M1 Garand's gas-operated system is elegant, robust, simple enough for mass production yet sophisticated enough for reliable function. The Americans designed a weapon for modern industrial warfare, a rifle that maximizes the effectiveness of individual soldiers by eliminating the mechanical overhead of bolt-action operation. Japan could build such a weapon. Japanese engineers aren't inferior. But Japan is fighting a war across the Pacific while maintaining a massive army in China. Resources are stretched thin. Retooling factories to produce a new rifle design would take years and consume resources needed for aircraft, ships, and artillery. So Japanese soldiers will keep using Arisaka rifles. And American Marines will keep using M1 Garands. And the firepower disparity will continue to shape every infantry engagement. Watanabe pulls a notebook from his pack and begins writing a detailed report on American infantry tactics, equipment, and firepower. He describes the sound of semi-automatic rifle fire, the way American positions maintain continuous suppressive fire, the psychological impact of facing an enemy that seems to reload instantly. He includes recommendations: avoid frontal assaults, use indirect approaches, increase artillery support, attack only with overwhelming force. He doesn't expect the report to change anything. The Japanese army is committed to its doctrine of aggressive shock tactics. But perhaps some staff officer in Tokyo will read it and understand what's happening in the Pacific. Perhaps they'll realize that courage and discipline aren't enough when facing a fundamental firepower advantage. The sun sets. The ship steams north toward Rabaul. Behind them, Guadalcanal fades into the darkness, an island where Japanese infantry doctrine collided with American industrial capacity and came away broken. The pattern is set now. It will repeat across 1,000 islands and beaches for the next 3 years. November 18, 1942. Camp Elliott, California. Sergeant Mike Donovan walks down the firing line, watching 24 recruits practice with their newly issued M1 Garands. The morning sun beats down on the dusty rifle range, and the crack of semi-automatic fire echoes off the hills. Each recruit fires 8 rounds at a target 200 yards downrange, reloads, and fires 8 more. The rhythm is continuous, no long pauses, no fumbling with bolt actions. "Cease fire!" Donovan calls out. The shooting stops. He approaches Private James Chen, a second-generation Chinese-American from San Francisco who's been struggling with his reload technique. "Show me your reload," Donovan orders. Chen performs the motion, the en-bloc clip pings out of the rifle automatically when empty. He pulls a fresh clip from his cartridge belt, positions it above the magazine, and pushes down with his thumb. The bolt slams forward with a satisfying metallic clack. 5 seconds, Donovan says, checking his stopwatch. "Needs to be 3. "You're thinking too much. Make it muscle memory." Again. Chen practices the motion 10 more times without ammunition, extract clip, position, thumb it in, bolt forward. Over and over until the movement becomes automatic. This is the new Marine Corps training doctrine, developed after analyzing combat reports from Guadalcanal. The M1 Garand's mechanical advantage only matters if soldiers can exploit it. That means drilling reloading until it's unconscious, teaching soldiers to count their shots so they know when the 8th round is coming, training them to maintain fire discipline while maximizing their rate of aimed fire. The Japs have good soldiers, Donovan tells the recruits during the break. Don't let anyone tell you different. They're disciplined, they're brave, and they know how to fight. But you've got something they don't, a rifle that lets you put out 4 times the firepower. Use it right, and you'll win every firefight. Use it wrong, waste ammo, panic and spray bullets, and all that advantage goes away. The training manual for the M1 Garand emphasizes aimed semi-automatic fire. Not full automatic spray, the Garand doesn't have that capability and doesn't need it. Semi-automatic fire with proper sight picture. Acquire target, fire. Acquire next target, fire. The gas system handles the mechanical cycling. The soldier handles the tactics and marksmanship. Private Chen will ship out to the Pacific in 6 weeks. The muscle memory he's building today will save his life at Tarawa. December 1, 1942. Buna, New Guinea. The jungle here is different from Guadalcanal, thicker, wetter, more oppressive. Private First Class Eugene Jacob slogs through knee-deep swamp water, his M1 Garand held above the surface to keep it dry. Around him, soldiers from the 32nd Infantry Division advance through the coastal jungle toward Japanese positions at Buna village. This is the Army's first major offensive in the Pacific, and it's proving harder than anyone expected. The Japanese have fortified Buna with bunkers made from coconut logs and coral, positioned in depth throughout the jungle. Machine gun nests cover every approach. The fighting has been brutal, close-range firefights in dense vegetation, bunkers that have to be cleared one by one, casualties mounting daily. Jacobs's platoon is tasked with taking out a Japanese strongpoint blocking the advance toward the airfield. Intelligence estimates 20 to 30 Japanese soldiers, dug in behind log fortifications. The platoon has 42 men, most armed with M1 Garands, +2 Browning automatic rifles and a .30 caliber machine gun team. Lieutenant Morrison briefs them during a lull. We're going to establish a base of fire and maneuver on their flank. First squad, you're the base element, get online and pour fire into that position. Keep their heads down. Second squad, you're with me on the left flank. When they're suppressed, we move. This is American infantry doctrine adapted for Pacific warfare. Use firepower to suppress, maneuver to flank. The M1 Garand makes it possible for a 12-man squad to generate the suppressive fire that would normally require a much larger unit. At 1 p.m. hours, first squad opens fire. Jacob settles into a prone position behind a fallen tree, his Garand stock pressed tight against his shoulder. He can see the Japanese bunker 70 yards ahead, a low structure of logs and earth with firing slits barely visible through the jungle foliage. Muzzle flashes wink from the slits as Japanese soldiers return fire. On target, rapid fire! Sergeant Kowalski shouts. Jacobs aims at the firing slit and squeezes the trigger. The Garand fires. He holds his sight picture and fires again immediately. And again. 8 rounds in 15 seconds, all aimed at the same firing slit. Spent brass casings arc through the air and land in the mud. The clip pings out. Jacobs reloads, 3 seconds, and resumes firing. All along the firing line, 11 more Marines are doing exactly the same thing. 12 M1 Garands, all firing at the bunker, approximately 450 rounds per minute of combined semi-automatic fire. The volume is extraordinary. Bullets slam into the logs, chip coral, ricochet off stones. The Japanese return fire slackens, not because they're casualties, but because they can't expose themselves to shoot without being hit. This is suppression. This is what the M1 Garand was designed to do. Inside the bunker, Sergeant Kenji Yoshida presses himself against the log wall, listening to bullets impact the fortification. He commands 18 men, all armed with Arisaka rifles and one Type 96 light machine gun. They're positioned well, with good fields of fire, adequate ammunition. By all doctrinal standards, they should be able to hold this position against a frontal assault. But the Americans aren't making a frontal assault. Yoshida risks a glance through the firing slit and immediately pulls back as 3 rounds crack past his head. The Americans have established a firing line and are maintaining continuous fire. Every time one of Yoshida's men tries to return fire, bullets force them back into cover. Private Ichiro Tanaka, positioned at the right side firing slit, works his Arisaka bolt and fires 1 round at the American position. Before he can cycle the bolt for a second shot, return fire forces him to duck. He works the bolt in cover, rises to fire again, and the cycle repeats. 1 shot every 6 to 8 seconds under these conditions. The American firing at him is getting off for shots for every one of Tanaka's machine gun. Yoshida orders. Suppress their position. The Type 96 light machine gun opens up, a 6.5mm weapon with a 30-round box magazine, firing at 550 rounds per minute. It's an excellent weapon, reliable and accurate. The gunner sweeps fire across the American position, forcing them to take cover. But the American machine gun answers immediately. The .30 caliber Browning has a heavier punch, longer range, and belt-fed ammunition. The duel lasts less than 30 seconds before the Japanese machine gunner takes a round through the shoulder and slumps away from his weapon. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Morrison's second squad has worked around to the bunker's left flank. Yoshida realizes the danger too late. American soldiers appear through the jungle on his exposed side, 8 men with M1 Garands, advancing by fire and movement. 2 soldiers fire while the others move forward, then those soldiers drop into cover and fire while the first pair advances. Leapfrogging tactics, covered by semi-automatic fire. The flanking attack is devastating. Yoshida's men have to reposition to face the new threat, but moving inside the bunker under fire is chaos. Soldiers try to bring their Arisaka rifles to bear, but the Americans are firing continuously. Private Tanaka takes a round through the chest. Corporal Nakano goes down with a leg wound. Yoshida makes the decision to withdraw. Staying means annihilation. He orders his men to fall back through the rear of the bunker, into the jungle, to a secondary defensive position 50 yards deeper. The withdrawal is costly. Men moving in the open, even briefly, are exposed to American fire. 5 soldiers don't make it. They fall in the jungle undergrowth, cut down by semi-automatic fire that seems to come from everywhere at once. Yoshida reaches the secondary position with 11 men, a 40% casualty rate for a fighting withdrawal of 50 yards. The Americans didn't have superior numbers. They didn't have better positions. They had firepower. The battle for Buna continues for another month. The 32nd Infantry Division takes heavy casualties, casualty rates approaching 85% in some companies. But they take Buna. They take it through a combination of artillery support, flamethrowers, and overwhelming infantry firepower. Every bunker fight, every jungle skirmish follows the same pattern: American squads using M1 Garands to establish fire superiority, then maneuvering to flank or assault. The Japanese write detailed after-action reports. Recommendations go up the chain of command: increase automatic weapons per squad, improve fortification density, avoid exposed positions. But the fundamental problem remains unsolved. Japanese infantry armed with bolt-action rifles cannot generate equivalent firepower to American infantry armed with semi-automatic rifles. The math doesn't work. No amount of courage or tactical skill can overcome a 4-to-1 disadvantage in sustained fire rate. January 15, 1943. Imperial Japanese Army General Staff, Tokyo. Lieutenant Colonel Masotaka Ida reviews casualty reports from Guadalcanal, Buna, and a dozen smaller engagements. The numbers tell a consistent story: Japanese infantry units are taking disproportionate casualties in small unit engagements. Company-level actions that should be competitive are turning into massacres. The Americans aren't winning through better tactics or superior soldiers, they're winning through firepower. Ida has been tasked with analyzing the problem and recommending solutions. His report sits on his desk, 30 pages of careful analysis. The conclusions are uncomfortable. The Type 38 Arisaka rifle, while accurate and reliable, is fundamentally inadequate for modern infantry combat against opponents armed with semi-automatic weapons, he writes. Japanese infantry squads cannot generate sufficient suppressive fire to support maneuver tactics. The doctrinal emphasis on aggressive assault and close combat is failing when soldiers are cut down before they can close to effective range. He recommends 3 possible solutions. First, develop and field a Japanese semi-automatic rifle. Ida knows this is impossible in the short term. Japan's industrial capacity is fully committed to aircraft and naval production. Retooling for a new rifle would take years. The war can't wait years. Second, increase the number of automatic weapons per squad. Issue more Type 96 and Type 99 light machine guns, add submachine guns to assault elements. This is feasible but resource-intensive. Each light machine gun requires a 3-man crew and significantly more ammunition. Third, revise infantry tactics to avoid situations where firepower disparity matters. Use night attacks, infiltration tactics, defensive positions that negate American firepower advantages. Fight differently. Ida knows the third option is the only realistic one. But changing doctrine is like turning a battleship: slow, difficult, and requiring complete institutional buy-in. The Japanese Army's culture emphasizes aggressive offensive action. Defensive tactics and infiltration don't align with the martial spirit that has defined Japanese military success for decades. His report will be filed, read by staff officers, and largely ignored. The tactical changes will come eventually, born from necessity and written in blood. But they'll come too late. February 8, 1943. Guadalcanal. The campaign is ending. After 6 months of brutal fighting, Japanese forces are evacuating the island, a series of nighttime withdrawals by destroyer, pulling out survivors from the jungle. It's a defeat, though Japanese propaganda will call it a strategic withdrawal. The Americans control Henderson Field. The Americans control the island. The Solomon Islands campaign continues, but Guadalcanal is over. Private Leckie sits on the beach near Lunga Point, cleaning his M1 Garand for what feels like the 1000th time. Disassemble the gas cylinder, check for carbon buildup, clean the operating rod, inspect the bolt face, oil the moving parts, reassemble. The ritual is meditative after months of combat. The Garand saved his life dozens of times. When Japanese soldiers charged his position at the Ilu River, the rifle fired every time he pulled the trigger, no jams, no malfunctions. When he was outnumbered in the jungle, semi-automatic fire gave him the firepower to suppress multiple threats. When ammunition ran low, the Garand's accuracy let him make every shot count. It's not a perfect weapon. The 8-round en-bloc clip limits magazine capacity, many soldiers wish it held more. The distinctive ping of the ejecting clip can alert nearby enemies that you're reloading. The rifle is heavy compared to some bolt actions. In the jungle humidity, it requires constant maintenance to prevent rust. But it works. In combat, when everything else is chaos and fear and confusion, the M1 Garand works. Point, shoot, the rifle cycles itself, shoot again. Simple. Reliable. Effective. Sergeant Basilone walks past, his machine gun slung over his shoulder. He'll ship out soon, back to the States for a war bond tour after receiving the Medal of Honor for his actions on Edson's Ridge. He survived Guadalcanal through a combination of skill, luck, and overwhelming firepower. His machine gun crew fired nearly 40,000 rounds during the campaign. The battle for Guadalcanal cost the Americans 7,100 dead and wounded. Japanese casualties exceeded 30,000, killed, wounded, or dead from disease and starvation. The casualty ratio isn't solely due to the M1 Garand. American artillery, air support, and naval gunfire all played roles. Logistics and disease killed thousands of Japanese soldiers who never saw combat. But in the small unit infantry fights, the night battles, the jungle skirmishes, the desperate close-range firefights, the M1 Garand made the difference. One American squad with 12 Garands could fight and win against a Japanese platoon with 50 Arisakas. That firepower advantage, multiplied across hundreds of engagements, shaped the entire campaign. And the war is just beginning. From Guadalcanal, the Americans will push north through the Solomons, west across New Guinea, island hopping toward the Philippines and Japan itself. Every island, every beach, every jungle will see the same pattern repeat, Japanese soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles facing American troops armed with semi-automatic fire. The outcome is almost mathematical. Not predetermined, soldiers still have to fight, to suffer, to die, but shaped by fundamental advantages that no amount of courage can overcome. Leckie finishes cleaning his rifle and loads a fresh en-bloc clip. 8 rounds. Ready for whatever comes next. June 15, 1944. Red Beach, Saipan. The ramp drops and Corporal David Martinez plunges into chest-deep water, his M1 Garand held high above the surf. Around him, Marines from the 2nd Division wade toward the beach through a storm of machine gun fire. Japanese defenders on the high ground have excellent fields of fire. This beach landing is nothing like the unopposed landings in training. This is contested every yard. Martinez makes it to the beach and throws himself behind a disabled Amtrak, breathing hard. His Garand is soaked with salt spray but functional. One of the weapon's key advantages is its robust gas system, designed to work even when wet and dirty. He checks the action, bolt moves freely, trigger mechanism responds. 8 rounds loaded. Ready. Move inland. Lieutenant Carey shouts over the din of explosions and gunfire. Don't bunch up on the beach. Martinez rises and runs, zigzagging across the sand toward a low seawall 75 yards ahead. Japanese bullets kick up sand around his feet. A Marine to his left goes down. Another takes cover behind a shell crater. The beach is chaos, tanks burning, landing craft trying to unload under fire, wounded men being dragged back to the water. Martinez reaches the seawall and drops behind it, gasping. 6 other Marines are already there, pressed against the coral structure, trying to identify Japanese firing positions. The enemy is dug in on the high ground, bunkers, trenches, fortified positions covering the entire beach approach. We've got to suppress those bunkers. Carey yells, sliding into position beside Martinez. Concentrated fire on that position at 2 o'clock, about 150 yards. 7 M1 Garands come up over the seawall simultaneously. 7 Marines firing semi-automatic, aiming at the same bunker position. The volume of fire is immediate and sustained. Bullets slam into the bunker's embrasure, forcing the Japanese machine gunner to duck back into cover. The suppressive fire continues, reload, fire 8 more, reload, fire again. This is Saipan, 2 years after Guadalcanal, and American infantry tactics have evolved. The lessons learned in the Solomons and New Guinea have been codified into doctrine. Use the M1 Garand's firepower advantage to suppress enemy positions. Coordinate fire from multiple rifles. Maintain continuous suppression while other elements maneuver. The basic principles haven't changed, but the execution has been refined through dozens of battles. Staff Sergeant Nakamura Hideki watches the American landing from his position in a concrete bunker 200 yards inland. He's 26 years old, a veteran of China and Guadalcanal, one of the survivors evacuated from that disaster. He knows what's coming. He's seen American firepower before. His squad has 15 men, all armed with Type 38 or Type 99 Arisaka rifles, plus one Type 92 heavy machine gun. They're positioned well, with interlocking fields of fire, concrete overhead cover, and adequate ammunition. By Japanese defensive doctrine, they should be able to hold this position against the initial American assault. But Nakamura knows the doctrine is flawed. He learned that lesson on Guadalcanal. Hold your fire until they advance from the seawall, Nakamura orders his men. Aimed shots only. Make every round count. The Americans begin their advance at 8:45 hours. They don't charge blindly, they move by squads, one element providing covering fire while another advances. The covering fire is intense. Nakamura counts muzzle flashes, 12 rifles firing continuously from the seawall, pouring bullets at his position. Bullets impact the concrete, ricochet off the bunker's firing slit, force his men to keep their heads down. His machine gunner tries to return fire and immediately draws concentrated return fire from the American position. 3, 4, 5 rifles all shooting at the machine gun embrasure within seconds. The gunner is forced to cease fire and take cover. Fire! Nakamura shouts. His men rise to the firing slits with their Arisaka rifles. They aim and fire. Work the bolt. Aim and fire again. 15 men with bolt-action rifles, each firing perhaps 12 to 15 aimed shots per minute under these conditions. Total squad output, approximately 200 rounds per minute. The Americans are firing at least 4 times that rate. The mathematical imbalance is crushing. For every bullet Nakamura's squad fires, the Americans fire 4. Japanese soldiers can't maintain accurate aimed fire while being constantly suppressed. Every time they expose themselves to shoot, American return fire forces them back into cover. The Americans can fire from covered positions and maintain continuous suppression because they don't need to work bolt actions between shots. Nakamura watches one American squad advance while another provides covering fire. The advancing Marines move quickly, using terrain for cover, but always covered by the sustained semi-automatic fire from their squad mates. When they reach a new position, they become the covering element, and the original covering squad advances. Fire and movement. Simple tactical concept. But it requires one element to maintain sustained suppressive fire while the other maneuvers. Bolt-action rifles can't generate that sustained fire. Semi-automatic rifles can. The American squad reaches a position 50 yards from Nakamura's bunker. Close enough to assault. They establish a base of fire, 8 M1 Garands firing continuously at the bunker's embrasures, while 4 Marines maneuver to the bunker's flank. Nakamura knows what comes next. He's seen this pattern before. The flanking element will get close enough to use demolition charges or flamethrowers. His position will be destroyed. His men will die. Fall back to the secondary position, he orders. Move now. The withdrawal is a nightmare. Moving under fire, even the short distance to the next defensive position, costs him 4 men. American rifles track every movement, fire continuously. By the time Nakamura reaches the secondary position, a trench line 30 yards behind the bunker, his squad is down to 11 men. The Americans clear the bunker with demolition charges and flamethrowers. Then they advance on the trench line. The pattern repeats. June 16, 1944. Central Saipan. The battle for Saipan will continue for another 3 weeks. Japanese forces fight with fanatical determination, using the island's rugged terrain to create defense in depth. American casualties are severe, over 3,400 killed and 13,000 wounded. But Japanese casualties are catastrophic, virtually the entire garrison of 30,000 men, killed or captured. In the small unit infantry fights that characterize the campaign, the M1 Garand continues to prove its worth. Marine and Army squads use semi-automatic fire to establish local fire superiority, suppress Japanese positions, and enable maneuver. The tactical advantage compounds over hundreds of engagements. Each individual firefight might be close-run, but the cumulative effect favors the Americans decisively. Private Martinez survives the landing and fights inland for 2 weeks before catching shrapnel from a mortar round. He'll be evacuated to Pearl Harbor, recover for 3 months, and return to action at Iwo Jima. His M1 Garand, serial number 315-5867, will remain in service throughout the war, eventually being passed to a replacement when Martinez is finally rotated home in late 1945. Staff Sergeant Nakamura dies on June 24, killed by American artillery while repositioning his squad. He never files his detailed recommendations for countering American firepower superiority. Those recommendations die with him. October 24, 1944. Leyte Gulf, Philippines. The American return to the Philippines brings the full weight of U.S. industrial might to bear. Army divisions wade ashore on Leyte with every advantage: air superiority, naval gunfire support, overwhelming artillery, and infantry armed with M1 Garands, Browning automatic rifles, and improved flamethrowers. The Japanese defenders fight skillfully, using the jungle terrain and prepared positions, but the outcome is never in doubt. Sergeant Chen, the recruit who struggled with M1 Garand reloads back at Camp Elliott, leads a fire team through the Philippine jungle. His reload time is now under 2 seconds. He can field strip and clean his Garand in darkness. He knows the weapon's quirks, its tendencies, its reliable performance. The rifle has been his constant companion through Tarawa, Saipan, and now Leyte. It's kept him alive through dozens of firefights. Contact front, someone yells. Japanese soldiers appear through the jungle foliage, advancing in a skirmish line. Chen's team takes cover and opens fire immediately. For M1 Garands firing semi-automatic. The Japanese formation, perhaps 20 men, tries to return fire but can't establish fire superiority. They're outnumbered in firepower despite having numerical superiority. The firefight lasts less than 3 minutes. The Japanese withdraw, leaving several dead. Chen's team suffers no casualties. It's not heroic or dramatic, it's just the tactical reality of a firepower advantage playing out in jungle combat. This scene repeats itself across Leyte, across the Philippines, across every island the Americans assault in 1944 and 1945. The pattern is so consistent it becomes almost routine. American squads engage Japanese positions, establish fire superiority through volume of semi-automatic fire, maneuver to flank or assault. Japanese forces resist skillfully but lack the firepower to compete. American casualties are significant. Japanese casualties are catastrophic. February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima. The volcanic island is a fortress, 21,000 Japanese defenders in a network of tunnels, bunkers, and fortified positions. The defense is sophisticated, designed to maximize American casualties. Japanese soldiers are ordered to fight from concealed positions, avoid banzai charges, and make the Americans pay for every yard. The tactics work. American casualties on Iwo Jima are horrific: 6,800 killed and 19,000 wounded in 5 weeks of fighting. The Japanese fight smarter, using terrain and fortifications to negate American firepower advantages where possible. But they still can't win firefights. Corporal Martinez, back in action after his wounds on Saipan, participates in the cave-clearing operations on Iwo Jima's northern end. His squad approaches a cave entrance, expecting Japanese resistance. They establish a firing line and pour semi-automatic fire into the cave mouth, sustained fire that forces any defenders to stay deep inside. Then demolitions and flamethrowers. The cave is cleared. The squad advances to the next position. The M1 Garand makes these operations survivable by allowing small units to generate enough suppressive fire to support their own maneuvers. Lieutenant Yamamoto Kenji commands the cave defense. He's a 24-year-old officer, educated at the military academy, assigned to Iwo Jima with full knowledge it's a death sentence. The island will fall. Everyone knows this. The objective is to kill as many Americans as possible before dying. Yamamoto's men are positioned in a cave complex with multiple firing positions and good fields of fire. They have adequate ammunition, food, and water. They're prepared to fight for weeks. But when the Americans approach, the same tactical problem emerges. Japanese bolt-action rifles can't generate sufficient suppressive fire to stop American maneuvers. Yamamoto's men fire from concealed positions, take aimed shots, follow doctrine perfectly. But they're shooting 15 times per minute while the Americans shoot 60 times per minute. The math is still impossible. We cannot win these exchanges, Yamamoto writes in his diary that night. American firepower is overwhelming at the squad level. Their individual riflemen fire as rapidly as our light machine guns. No tactical brilliance can overcome this fundamental disadvantage. We can only die with honor and inflict maximum casualties in the process. He dies 4 days later when the Americans collapse his cave complex with demolition charges. April 1, 1945. Okinawa. The final island battle. The largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. Over 100,000 Japanese defenders against 180,000 American attackers. The fighting will continue for 82 days, the bloodiest campaign of the Pacific. The tactical patterns remain unchanged. American infantry squads, armed with M1 Garands, engage Japanese positions with overwhelming firepower. Japanese soldiers, still primarily armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, fight with desperate skill but cannot match the American fire output. Private First Class Thomas Burke lands on Okinawa with the 96th Infantry Division. He's 18 years old, trained for 6 months, issued a M1 Garand at basic training. The rifle is as familiar to him as his own hands. He's never fired a bolt-action rifle in his life. The M1 Garand has been the standard American infantry weapon for his entire military career. Burke doesn't think about the tactical advantage he possesses. He just knows that when he pulls the trigger, the rifle fires, cycles itself, and is ready to fire again. It's normal to him. It's just how rifles work. But to Japanese soldiers who've spent their entire military careers with bolt-action Arisakas, Burke's ability to fire rapid semi-automatic is a technological advantage they can never overcome. When Burke's squad engages a Japanese position, the Americans pour out 400 to 500 rounds per minute of aimed rifle fire. The Japanese position, even if equal in size, can only return 100 to 150 rounds per minute. 4-1. Every firefight. Every engagement. For 3 years. The cumulative effect is devastating. August 15, 1945. Tokyo. Japan surrenders. The war is over. The reasons are complex: atomic bombs, Soviet invasion of Manchuria, exhaustion, the destruction of Japanese cities by firebombing. But on the ground, in the infantry battles that characterized the Pacific War, the pattern was consistent from Guadalcanal to Okinawa: American firepower superiority at every level. The M1 Garand wasn't the only factor. American artillery was more numerous and better coordinated. American air power was overwhelming. American logistics were unmatched. But in the squad-level firefights, where individual soldiers faced each other across jungle clearings and coral ridges, the M1 Garand gave American infantry a 4-to-1 advantage in sustainable fire rate. That advantage shaped every tactical engagement. It allowed smaller American units to establish fire superiority against larger Japanese forces. It enabled fire and movement tactics that would have been impossible with bolt-action rifles. It gave American squad leaders the firepower to suppress enemy positions while maneuvering for assault. September 2, 1945. USS Missouri, Tokyo Bay. The surrender ceremony is formal, historic. General MacArthur signs the documents. The war is officially over. On the deck of the battleship, honor guards stand at attention with M1 Garand rifles, the same weapon that armed infantrymen through 3.5 years of brutal Pacific combat. Somewhere in the crowd of American military personnel, Sergeant Martinez stands with his rifle at parade rest. The Garand is pristine, cleaned, oiled, ready for inspection. It's not the same rifle he carried at Saipan, that one was damaged at Iwo Jima and replaced. But it's the same design, the same capability, the same fundamental advantage that defined American infantry performance throughout the war. He thinks about the men he fought beside, the ones who didn't make it home. He thinks about the Japanese soldiers he killed, enemy combatants, yes, but men nonetheless, fighting for their country with the weapons they were given. Brave men, skilled soldiers, caught in a technological mismatch they couldn't overcome. The M1 Garand didn't win the Pacific War alone. But it changed the nature of infantry combat. It proved that industrial capacity and technological innovation could create decisive advantages even in the brutal simplicity of small unit firefights. It demonstrated that sometimes, in war, better equipment matters as much as courage and skill. Japanese survivors will later write about the shock of facing American firepower, the continuous, relentless crack of semi-automatic rifles that never seemed to pause, never seemed to reload, just kept firing and firing until resistance collapsed. They'll describe the psychological impact of being outgunned, of knowing that every firefight was tilted against them by simple mathematics. American veterans will remember the M1 Garand as the rifle that kept them alive. Reliable, powerful, simple to operate. A weapon that did its job battle after battle, island after island, firefight after firefight. The ceremony concludes. The war is over. The rifles that shaped the Pacific campaign will be cleaned, catalogued, stored in armories. Many will see service again in Korea. Some will remain in use until the 1960s, when the M14 finally replaces them. But in September 1945, standing on the deck of the Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the M1 Garand represents more than just a weapon. It represents the industrial capacity, technological innovation, and tactical adaptation that characterized the American war effort. It's a symbol of how a single piece of equipment, properly designed, mass-produced, and employed by well-trained soldiers, can shape the outcome of thousands of tactical engagements. Japanese soldiers couldn't believe one American rifle squad had more firepower than their entire platoon. By war's end, after 3 years of evidence, they believed it. They'd seen the proof written in casualty reports, after-action analyses, and the accumulated experience of every infantry engagement from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. The firepower disparity was real. The mathematical advantage was undeniable. And it helped win the war.